was running on the trails at the NEHorrorfiles homestead in Connecticut, which is only about a 10-minute drive from my grandmother's lake house. I could not find a map of the trails anywhere online, and there didn't seem to be any signage at the place. Just a bunch of random mountain bike trails in the woods. I was only going to run 4 miles, so I estimated that I would run for about 30 minutes, using my watch to keep myself on track. So I ran around the trails for a while, and nothing seemed too out of the ordinary. It was about 9 on a Monday morning, and the only sounds were the distant hums of Route 31, birds chirping, and the occasional squirrel or deer that scampered off whenever I came near. The trails seemed to wind around a lot, and if not for my better-than-average directional skills, I could have easily gotten lost. About 20 minutes in, I saw something strange about 50 meters off. A finely polished, light-colored wooden coffin. I was a little weirded out, to say the least, and waited until I got closer for a better look. I rounded a corner where several old tree stumps blocked my view, only to find that the coffin had disappeared. Where it should have been was a clump of ferns. Odd. I turned around shortly thereafter and made my way back to my car. I was maybe a half-mile out when I heard a very distinctive knocking on a nearby tree to the rhythm of "Shave and a Haircut." Except no 2 bits. I was a little spooked, but chalked it up to be a woodpecker or something. However, not 30 seconds later, there it was on a completely different tree up ahead somewhere. I picked up the pace. The trail widened a little, and I could see way ahead, to the parking lot where my car was. There it was again, on a tree seemingly right next to me. I truly started freaking out, and started to book it back to the lot. I was nearing the opening when time seemed to slow down. All of a sudden, it felt like the temperature dropped about 20 degrees. The birds stopped singing, and my simple Timex watch started to malfunction, making all sorts of beeping noises and the numbers glitching on the screen. The beat sounded impossibly loud this time, like it was hacked into every surrounding tree with a hand axe. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over me as I anticipated hearing the 2 bits refrain, or perhaps worse. I burst into the parking lot, and everything went back to normal. The temperature was back in the mid-70s, and birds were chirping away. I looked at my watch, only to discover that it had gone completely blank. I stood there and stared at it until it flashed 12 o'clock, Monday, January 1st. My watch had reset itself. It had never done this before. I got into the car and started the engine. The clock on the radio display read 12. That couldn't be right. It should have been around 9:30 or 9:45 at the latest. I put her in reverse and backed up to where I could clearly make my way out to the main road. However, as I was about to throw the car into drive as it sat there, I heard a sharp rapping sound on the back window, like someone hitting it with their knuckles. There was no one else in the parking lot when I had finished my run. No cars, no nothing. I didn't dare look back, and hightailed it back to my grandmother's house. I have no idea what could have caused this series of events. I still can't explain it to this day. A guy came up to me in a gaming shop around 1991. I was in high school. He says, "Is Allie's sister okay?" Very weird. I was dating a girl named Allie at the time, and I don't remember saying anything about her. The guy claimed to be a psychometrist for the FBI, claimed psychic powers. Very odd dude. My friend Dan and I were into the whole Mysteries of the Unknown books at the time. So we decided to talk to the guy. We went to his house, and he basically did what I came to know as mentalist parlor tricks, showing us a sentence and making us not see all of these words in it, mentally tricking us, talking about Gaia theory, teaching us how to see auras. We were young geeks interested in sci-fi, and it was fascinating. We ended up meeting with him a bunch more times, always the same fascinating way of talking about what he did and the powers he had. He also had a really hot girlfriend, and he was a larger, unattractive, pudgy guy, so we wondered how all that happened, and how we could do it too. He claimed that it was his psychic abilities. Long story short, we went out with him to this old trailer park in the backwoods of Connecticut near Barkhamsted or something. He drove, so I don't remember. But he claimed that up in the hills, there was a family that had gone through a winter and frozen to death. This was early summer, so there was no chance of that for us, but it was a neat ghost story. We thought we were having an adventure. We get to the place, and it has this big central wooden house in the middle of the campsite with pool tables, ping pong, and such. Eric, the guy, tells Dan and I to go explore, so we do. We wander around this place while Eric goes down and swims in the pool below. It's about 5 p.m. and still light out, but Eric has been filling our heads with ghost stories all morning, so Dan and I are creeped out. We head up to the 3rd floor of the place, and I look out the window to see Eric floating in the pool 2 stories below. Now Dan and I are shoulder to shoulder heading up this wood staircase gabbing, and as we top the stairs, I suddenly hear whispering in my right ear. "Come talk to me." I turn to Dan and feel like all of the hair on my body is standing on end. His eyes are super wide because he had been talking mid-sentence when the whisper came. I say, "Did you hear that?" He nods really fast, and we beat a super fast retreat down the stairs. We went back up a few minutes later because we felt like chicken shits and called out. But nothing else happened. Then we felt that Eric might have been fucking with us, so we checked the place for how he could have done it. We couldn't figure out any way that it was possible. It was really weird and creepy. But that's not the actual creepy part. A few weeks later, Eric drove me home and was talking about what he could do physically, and the conversation just turned. He started talking about how people who wanted to be adepts or learn from him wanted to sleep with him, and there was definitely a sense that he was encouraging me to be one of the people in his circle. We got to my house, and I politely said, "Well, that's not me," and I got out. I never saw him again. Years later, I looked him up and saw that he had a similar culty shtick going on. I realized that I had dodged a serial predator. Since I had been on and off of his bandwagon, I just felt like thanking the bullshit detector of my younger self for getting me out of there. Still creeps me out how close he got, and how dangerous those situations I put myself in could have been. My wife and I got married last October. Prior to this, we had been living for a year with her parents in their house in Connecticut. It was an old Victorian that had once been a doctor's office, in which several people had passed away. We inhabited her childhood bedroom and her brother's room, which had a connecting door between them, so we had a sweet little setup. However, I snore really badly. I've had it all checked out, and there seems to be just something about my head that makes me snore. Unfortunately, it's one of the noises that my wife absolutely cannot stand. So most nights we end up trading off where we sleep. At the beginning of our stay, before we took her brother's room, we just had the one bed, so one of us would go across the hall to her sister's room and sleep in her bed. That room in particular was haunted as fuck. My wife and I both told each other it seemed like there was someone watching us while we slept. And it was always super warm in there in comparison to the rest of the house. Her sister, coming home for Christmas break, also mentioned that she had felt that growing up all the time. It felt to the three of us like it was an old woman. The presence was usually in the corner of the room closest to the attic stairs, which were in the hallway. But we all described that occasionally it felt like she was watching us from very close. Fast forward a few months, and my now wife and I had moved back down to Texas, where I grew up, but still had our wedding planned for Connecticut in October, which meant that we would have to travel back up there for the wedding. We do, and for the first 2 nights of the week we were there, we stayed with her family. The first night, my wife has a terrible migraine, and we put her in the sister's room because it was the one we could most easily make dark. At first, it felt the same as we were used to. Then, as her migraine progressed to the point that she was crying from the pain, the atmosphere in the room suddenly changed. The temperature seemed to drop about 20 degrees, and the room felt comforting. My wife said later that as soon as that happened, the pain lessened. She felt like someone was there protecting her the whole time. More creepy stories about the house. The attic mentioned above had 2 sets of stairs, one near the front of the house and one near the back. The back attic stairs basically being an extension of the main back stairs, closed off by a door. This was an old house that needed a lot of work, so nothing was quite square. Doors tended to not fit. The floor sloped in odd places, etc. The attic door was no exception, and in order to properly shut it, you had to push it hard. It had a lock as well, but it was old and very difficult to turn. It could not be unlocked from the inside. This door was basically across the hall from our bedroom door. The other door was easier to open and did not have a lock. Several times I needed to go into the attic, and found that the back attic door was closed tightly and locked. Several times I had only noticed that the back door was locked after I had already gone up the front stairs and couldn't leave through the more convenient door. The thing is, I'm a big guy. 6 foot, 280 pounds at the time, and I had to struggle to close the door. And no one else in the house would have been able to close it, and yet it was frequently found to be wedged shut and locked. One evening, my wife took a nap in our sitting room, which was her old bedroom. I was playing a video game, and I realized she's talking in her sleep, which she does frequently, and it's usually hilarious. She's speaking very quietly, so I lean in closer and hear, "He lives in the attic. He wants to keep us safe, so he locks the door. He wants to protect the dogs. He wants to protect us. She doesn't like us going up there." And then she started crying. I woke her up. She said she had a dream about a man with extremely long arms and legs. It was kind of spider-like, dressed in all black in an old-fashioned tuxedo with tails. I freaked her out when I told her what she said, because the man was telling her that stuff in the dream. There were 3 distinct ghosts that I and her family had experienced there. One was the aforementioned woman in the sister's room. One was a woman who at night walked up and down the front stairs and usually wore a blue dress. And the third was a man who was usually spotted in the main hallway downstairs, who wore a tux and a top hat. For Christmas, my family, mom, dad, brother, drove up and visited. They came over for dinner one night, and we played Cards Against Humanity. There was some alcohol, and we were up pretty late. We were in the dining room downstairs. All of a sudden, my brother goes white as a sheet and said he saw a man walk past the dining room door in the hallway. My sister-in-law asked him what he looked like, and he said it was a tall man in a black top hat. I'd never told him about it, and he had no way of knowing. It was at some colonial-era church in Connecticut. They were having issues with the alarm system. I had to enter the church and travel to the basement through a section that they used for funeral services. Up until that point, the place looked like any other modernized old house, but when I got to the funeral service section, the pastor points me towards some double doors. He says the wiring is through there. I opened the doors to reveal what looked like catacombs. There was a dirt floor and those cobblestone-type walls. There were no lights either. I had to use a flashlight to travel down this dark, damp hallway till I reached the utility area. It was an easy fix. A wire feeding the alarm came loose. A mouse probably pulled it or something. I reconnect it and head on my way. 2 days later, I'm called back to the same place. I go back and the same wire is pulled. Thinking to myself that this must be some new rodent path, I relocate the wire and splice it together. A few days later, I get called back again, and my splice is undone. At this point, I don't know what's going on, but I actually speak out and say, "Hey, I don't know if someone is here or not. Maybe looking for attention, maybe lost. Maybe I'm crazy. But I'm asking you to please stop messing with this wire." I never got called back.